2 handguns, 34 rounds of ammunition, and a garden shed that quietly cracked open a 2-year criminal conspiracy. At first glance, the scene looked almost ordinary. A narrow residential street, a tired row of homes, and an outbuilding tucked behind a house in Thornton Heath. But what police found inside that shed didn't belong in a neighbourhood like this. And the discovery sent a ripple through London's criminal landscape. Because when investigators realised what they were looking at, the only question left was, how did something this dangerous end up here? And more importantly, who put it there? The deeper officers searched, the stranger the whole operation became. Every detail inside the outbuilding raised more questions. The way the guns were wrapped, the ammunition arranged, even the newspaper used as padding. It all felt wrong. It all felt bigger than a quiet residential address. And within hours, that uneasy feeling turned into a full-scale investigation that uncovered guns, Class A drugs, counterfeit cash, and a conspiracy running for years without drawing attention. That's the moment everything turned. A simple raid suddenly became the trigger point for a criminal operation collapsing in real time. It started on January 26, 2021. Armed officers and specialist detectives arrived at an address on Norbury Avenue. They were acting on intelligence, information quietly passed along that suggested something illegal was happening on the property. At the time, officers expected to find drugs, maybe small amounts, maybe nothing. But once they stepped onto the land, the tone of the operation changed instantly. Instead of finding minor evidence, they located a locked outbuilding and noticed something suspicious. Lewis, the resident, had the keys. He seemed nervous, and officers began to wonder what could be hidden inside. When the door opened, they found the truth within seconds. 2 functioning handguns, not antiques, not replicas. Real, dangerous firearms capable of causing fatal injuries. Beside them, exactly 34 rounds of ammunition. Enough to inflict significant harm. Enough to turn neighbourhood disputes into national headlines. Officers secured the area immediately. The outbuilding shifted from a routine search to a crime scene. And Darren Lewis, 53 years old, the man holding the keys, was arrested on the spot. But this moment was only the first piece of a much larger puzzle. Police knew guns like these rarely appear alone. They're usually part of something. Drug networks, debt enforcement, criminal protection. And so the forensic teams moved fast. They swabbed the guns, packaged the ammunition, and collected every scrap of material. That included the newspaper used to wrap the handguns. At the time, no one realized how important those crumpled pages would become. But the truth was hiding on the surface. Fingerprints, DNA traces, and tiny clues that connected this shed to 2 more men London police had never expected to find. When forensic results came back, they revealed 2 additional suspects. 28-year-old Alex Findlay from Knights Hill in Croydon, and 24-year-old Umut Alpagin from Flempton Road in Hackney. Both men had left trace evidence on the weapons or on the packaging, evidence strong enough to prove handling, storage, or involvement. And within days, officers had enough information to arrest both men. This wasn't just about one shed. This wasn't just a possession case. These fingerprints exposed a criminal operation that had been running quietly for years. Once Findlay and Alpagin were in custody, detectives began combing through financial records, communications, and related property searches. And what they uncovered explained everything. Between 2019 and 2021, Darren Lewis and Alex Findlay had been operating a Class A drug line. Regular supply, steady movement, and consistent financial gain. That explained the need for weapons. Guns are rarely kept for show. They exist to enforce debts, intimidate, protect drugs, or ensure control. And in this case, the presence of 2 functional handguns alongside ammunition proved the level of danger involved. But the discoveries didn't stop there. During the investigation, police found nearly £5,700 in counterfeit banknotes linked to Findlay. Fake cash often circulates within drug networks to minimize financial loss. Criminals pass fake notes during deals or use them to disguise profits. For the officers leading the case, this was another signal that the trio's activities weren't impulsive. They were organized, deliberate, and repeated over long periods. As detectives pieced the evidence together, they saw a timeline forming. From 2019 to 2021, Lewis and Findlay worked together in Class A drug supply. At some point, weapons were obtained, likely for protection or leverage, and fingerprints placed Alpagin among them, connecting him directly to the firearms. Everything tied back to that shed, a simple structure on a simple property that quietly held the truth behind their entire criminal operation. When the case reached Croydon Crown Court in May 2022, after a 3-week trial, the verdict was unanimous. All 3 men were found guilty of possession of firearms with intent to endanger life and possession of ammunition. These charges are among the most serious firearms offences in UK law. They don't require proof that the suspect planned to fire the weapon, only that they kept it with a willingness or intention that it could be used to threaten, intimidate, or cause harm. For the court, the combination of weapons, ammunition, and criminal activity established that intent. Lewis and Findlay had already pleaded guilty to Class A drug offences earlier in the proceedings. Findlay additionally admitted possessing the £5,690 in counterfeit cash seized during the investigation. And with all charges confirmed, the only thing left was sentencing. This is where the magnitude of the case became clear. The judge handed down heavy sentences reflecting the seriousness of firearms crime and the community risk involved. Darren Lewis received 14 years in prison, with an additional 3 years on extended license. At 53, this sentence would shape the rest of his life. He wasn't considered a minor player. He was viewed as a key facilitator, the person who controlled the outbuilding, stored the weapons, and maintained access. His age didn't lessen the punishment, it highlighted his responsibility. Alex Findlay, 28 years old, received the harshest sentence, 18 years in prison, plus a 4-year extended license, and even after release, he will remain under a serious crime prevention order for 5 years. These orders are only imposed when someone is considered a continuing risk of organised crime involvement. They restrict travel, communication, business activity, and even access to certain devices or materials. In other words, the court saw Findlay as someone who needed long-term monitoring. The youngest defendant, Umut Alpergan, received 9 years in prison. While he wasn't linked to the drug conspiracy, his involvement with the firearms was enough to secure a significant sentence. Any contact with illegal guns in the UK is treated as dangerous. Any involvement in storage, movement, or handling is punished heavily. And forensic evidence placed him directly in that chain. When sentencing concluded, Detective Constable Alex White stood by the case, stating that removing these firearms from Croydon streets prevented potential devastation. Each bullet represented a possible injury. Each gun represented a violent incident prevented. The Met emphasised how cooperation between local policing and specialist crime units made the operation successful. Without that coordination, these weapons might still be circulating in the community. And that's the underlying truth of this story. Guns hidden in sheds aren't just evidence, they're events waiting to happen. In London, illegal firearms fuel intimidation, enforce drug debts, escalate conflicts, and put innocent people at risk. One round fired at the wrong moment can change a neighbourhood forever. One gun passed to the wrong person can rewrite families' lives. And in this case, 2 guns and 34 rounds were taken out of circulation before they could cause irreversible harm. The counterfeit cash also raised alarms. Fake currency is rare compared to drug offences, but when it appears alongside firearms, it signals a network operating beyond simple street-level dealing. It suggests connections to suppliers, printers, or distributors capable of producing believable forgeries. These networks often fund other criminal activity, meaning the counterfeit notes weren't just a side crime. They were part of the financial structure supporting the drug operation. The outbuilding itself became symbolic of the entire case, a structure that blended into its surroundings yet stored enough danger to alter multiple lives. It demonstrated how criminal activity can hide in plain sight, masked by normality, unnoticed by neighbours, and undisturbed until the moment police intervene. Crime doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a quiet shed at the back of a quiet house. Forensic evidence became the key to everything. Without the fingerprints on the guns and the DNA on the newspaper wrappings, police would have struggled to connect 3 individuals to the weapons. But every smudge, every trace, and every handled surface told a story. The guns weren't just stored, they were touched, moved, and managed by multiple hands. That allowed investigators to map the chain of custody and prove involvement beyond reasonable doubt. What makes this case striking is how quickly it escalated after the initial raid. What started as a drugs warrant transformed within minutes into a firearms investigation. And from there, it revealed a Class A supply chain and counterfeit operation. Criminal networks often rely on secrecy and compartmentalization. But when one part collapses, the rest often follows. That's exactly what happened here. The shed fell first, the guns came next, and the network crumbled shortly after. By the time sentencing ended, 3 men were removed from the community for a long time. The streets of Croydon were safer, and a 2-year conspiracy involving drugs, weapons, and fake money had been dismantled. For detectives, this was a success story. No dramatic chase, no shootouts, just quiet, precise police work that prevented weapons from being used and stopped further harm. This is the reality of true crime in the UK. It's not always dramatic, it's not always loud. Sometimes it is a cold morning raid, a locked shed door, and the silent weight of 2 handguns sitting in a wooden outbuilding. Sometimes it's the smallest detail, a fingerprint, a scrap of newspaper, that exposes everything. And sometimes the most dangerous crimes are the ones that look completely ordinary until police open the door.